the Varangian Guard. In the year 988 CE, as crowds filled the vast ceremonial halls of Constantinople's imperial palace, a striking and unfamiliar presence appeared beside the Byzantine emperor's most trusted retinue. Towering warriors draped in bear and wolf pelts, gripping enormous two-handed axes unlike any weapon common to the Mediterranean world, advanced in silent formation behind the throne. Their pale features and harsh northern speech set them apart immediately. They were not Greeks, not Romans, not even natives of the Eastern Christian world. They were Vikings. And yet they stood as the personal protectors of the Eastern Roman Emperor. This was the Varangian Guard, a military phenomenon that defied geography, culture, and expectation. The creation of this force began with an extraordinary political bargain. Emperor Basil II, confronted by dangerous internal rebellions, turned to Prince Vladimir of Kievan Rus for military assistance. In exchange, Basil offered a dynastic marriage and recognition of Vladimir's conversion to Christianity. Vladimir responded by sending 6,000 of his most formidable warriors, south-hardened Norse fighters, seasoned by campaigns across England, Ireland, and the lands of the Franks. These were not mere raiders. They were experienced professionals whose battlefield discipline and raw power made them ideal for a role the emperor desperately required a guard loyal to him alone, beyond the influence of rival noble factions. Unlike conventional Byzantine troops, the Varangians operated outside the empire's political hierarchy. They answered directly to the emperor, pledged no loyalty to regional authorities, and were often quartered separately within heavily fortified compounds. Their signature weapon was the Rhomphaea-style long-handled axe, wielded with such devastating force that contemporary accounts describe them splitting armor and even horses with a single blow. They trained in shield wall combat, close protection formations, and the suppression of unrest within dense urban spaces. In many ways, they functioned as a medieval elite intervention force, something resembling a special operations unit centuries before the concept existed. Yet, perhaps the most unusual feature of the Varangian Guard was their cultural independence. They were permitted to speak their native languages, preserve their traditions, and even maintain limited elements of Norse religious practice while in imperial service. They became renowned not only for ferocity in battle, but for absolute reliability. Where bribery and intrigue plagued Byzantine politics, the Varangians were considered incorruptible. Their loyalty became legendary. Emperors trusted them not only on the battlefield, but within the most delicate and dangerous affairs of palace power. For more than 3 centuries, the Guard remained active, serving generation after generation of emperors. They fought in Sicily, Anatolia, and across the Balkans. Though their numbers changed over time, their identity never fully dissolved northern warriors embedded at the very center of Eastern Roman authority. They left behind traces of their presence in unexpected places, carving runic inscriptions into the marble balustrades of Constantinople's churches, as though marking a territory that history had never intended them to claim. And yet, despite centuries of service, their end came quietly. By the late 14th century, the rise of gunpowder warfare and shifting political realities rendered them increasingly irrelevant. The Byzantine Empire itself was weakening. No monumental tribute marked their passing. No later military system attempted to recreate their structure. Foreign elite soldiers granted autonomy and sworn directly to a sovereign ruler, trained not only for war but for intervention at the very heart of government power. Their existence presents a profound contradiction. In an age when identity, culture, and faith defined allegiance, the Varangian Guard stood apart from all three and served with unmatched devotion. By every expectation of empire, ethnicity, and military order, they should never have endured. Yet, they did more than endure. They flourished. If such a force could operate for centuries within one of history's greatest empires, what does that reveal about the limits of loyalty, identity, and control? Or perhaps more unsettling still, why has no one ever truly attempted to recreate them? The Mamluk Cavalry. In 1260, in the valley of Ain Jalut, a heavy stillness settled before one of the most unlikely victories in military history. The Mongol war machine, undefeated across vast stretches of Asia and Eastern Europe, advanced once more. But this time, they encountered a cavalry force that neither fled, nor fractured, nor feared. Instead, it struck with calculated precision, unseating Mongol archers, breaking their formations, and executing battlefield maneuvers that seemed centuries ahead of their time. The victors were not a traditional imperial army or a native militia. They were slave soldiers once owned, now commanders of a rising sultanate. They were the Mamluks. The Mamluks began as enslaved boys taken from Central Asia, the Caucasus, and southeastern Europe. Purchased at a young age, they were raised within an intense military system, confined to barracks, barred from marriage or property during training, and taught that their loyalty belonged entirely to the Sultan. Yet what emerged from this harsh structure was not a force of passive servants, but a warrior class whose combat abilities rivaled and often exceeded the finest professional armies of their era. From adolescence, Mamluk fighters were rigorously trained in mounted archery, sword combat, and advanced formation tactics. Each warrior was expected to excel in individual skill and coordinated unit warfare. Their cavalry practiced complex maneuvers resembling modern armored strategies, flanking assaults, feigned withdrawals, rapid encirclements, all directed through horn blasts and banner signals. Their composite bows could strike accurately from horseback at distances exceeding 300 feet. Their armor blended chainmail, lamellar plates, and hardened leather, balancing mobility with formidable protection. At Ain Jalut, these capabilities reached their peak. The Mamluks delivered the first decisive defeat ever inflicted on Mongol forces in open battle. They turned the Mongols' own tactics against them, staging a false retreat, drawing them into confined terrain, and then launching a coordinated ambush that shattered their cavalry. Contemporary chroniclers describe timing and cohesion so precise that modern analysts compare it to coordinated mechanized warfare. Yet, unlike the Mongols, the Mamluks did not inherit these methods from a nomadic warrior tradition. Their system was constructed, deliberately engineered through discipline and training. That is what makes them so extraordinary. No other slave-based institution in history produced a military elite that not only outlived its rulers, but seized power and established its own dynasty. After overthrowing the Ayyubid leadership, the Mamluks took control and governed Egypt and the Levant for more than 250 years. They became sultans, administrators, scholars, and patrons of culture, all while preserving their unique military order. Even more unusual was how their system sustained itself. Mamluks were forbidden from passing status to their sons. Each new generation had to be recruited from outside, trained anew, and proven in battle. It was a controlled cycle of elite warrior creation, without inheritance, without aristocracy, without bloodline continuity. Despite their dominance, detailed Mamluk military manuals remain rare and incomplete. Much of their training was transmitted orally or concealed within coded instruction, passed directly from master to apprentice. Surviving texts such as the Zubdat al-Tabarik provide only fragments. The full structure of their battlefield coordination, their ability to replicate enemy tactics, exploit terrain, and adapt in real time remains largely undocumented. By the 16th century, the rise of firearms diminished the battlefield role of traditional cavalry. The Ottoman Empire absorbed the Mamluks, and their system gradually dissolved. Yet for more than 2 centuries, they existed as a profound contradiction, enslaved outsiders who became sovereign rulers, foreign warriors who built a state from within. To recreate the Mamluk cavalry system today would demand an extreme fusion of psychological conditioning, relentless martial training, and social isolation, a structure that borders on dystopian, and yet it functioned not briefly, but across generations. What kind of society forges its most powerful defenders through captivity? And what does it mean when those defenders rise to rule? The ninja of Iga and Kōga. In 1581, under the cover of a moonless night, 40,000 troops loyal to Oda Nobunaga surrounded the mountainous province of Iga. They expected a swift and simple conquest, scattered villages, isolated resistance, nothing more. Instead, they encountered something far more unsettling: sudden ambushes from unseen attackers. Traps hidden along forest paths, messages intercepted before reaching their targets, supply depots ignited from within their own defenses. Nobunaga's commanders could not explain it. No one saw the enemy approach, no one heard them retreat, yet the army suffered steady losses. These were not spirits or illusions. They were the operatives of Iga and Kōga, the shadow specialist history would later call ninja. Contrary to legend, ninja were not mystical figures cloaked in black performing supernatural feats. They belonged to a real and highly organized system of asymmetric warfare that developed during Japan's chaotic Sengoku period. The isolated mountain communities of Iga and Kōga, cut off from centralized authority and excluded from traditional power structures, built their own parallel military discipline, one centered on stealth, sabotage, intelligence gathering, and psychological disruption. Their operatives were neither samurai nor hired mercenaries. They were trained specialists raised within a culture defined by secrecy and survival. Historical works such as the Bansen Shukai, compiled in the 17th century, reveal astonishing details of their preparation. Ninja learned lock manipulation, toxic substances, explosives, disguise, infiltration, and silent elimination. They memorized regional dialects, climbing methods, weather patterns, and even techniques for manipulating shadows using moonlight itself to mislead pursuers. Some manuals describe collapsible ladders, flotation footwear for crossing water, and smoke devices made from crushed shells and sulfur compounds. Yet their greatest sophistication lay in organization. Ninja functioned within specialized operational cells, intelligence gatherers, sabotage experts, couriers, and decoys. They communicated through coded writing, rotated identities depending on assignments, and embedded themselves deep inside enemy territory. In war, they infiltrated fortresses, ignited fires from within, or posed as defectors to spread false information. In peace, they served as covert observers, quietly monitoring rival domains. Their strategic mindset makes them difficult to categorize within conventional military history. Their emphasis on unpredictability, fear, and precise disruption resembles modern special operations forces far more than any feudal battlefield army. They operated in a realm that blurred the boundary between combat and espionage centuries before such distinctions were formally defined. When Oda Nobunaga finally crushed Iga in his brutal campaign of 1581, much of the ninja infrastructure was dismantled. Survivors scattered or entered the service of rival powers, including the Tokugawa shogunate, which later employed their abilities for internal surveillance. Yet, as their influence spread, documentation faded. The Tokugawa regime tightly controlled records of ninja activity, and later generations transformed them into myth. Today, most knowledge of their true methods survives only in fragmented scrolls and scattered references in military chronicles. No other pre-modern military system institutionalized stealth, deception, and psychological warfare to such an extent. Their existence in a culture dominated by honor-bound samurai warfare only deepens the contradiction. By traditional standards, their methods were not merely dishonorable, they were revolutionary. If the ninja of Iga and Kōga had developed without suppression, how might modern covert warfare look today? Would intelligence doctrines trace their origins not to the 20th century, but to remote mountain communities of 16th century Japan? Or more unsettling still, perhaps they already do, the Janissaries of the Ottoman Empire. In 1453, as the walls of Constantinople trembled beneath relentless Ottoman cannon fire, defenders noticed a strange rhythm rising beneath the chaos. It was not the pounding of siege drums or the shouting of irregular troops. It was the synchronized march of a disciplined formation moving in perfect unity, clad in distinctive uniforms, their elite status unmistakable. These were the Janissaries, soldiers without families, trained from childhood, bound by oath to a single ruler, and shaped by a system so radical that historians still struggle to fully explain its creation. The Janissary Corps was established in the late 14th century under Sultan Murad I. Its structure defied every norm of medieval warfare. These soldiers were neither noble knights nor hired mercenaries. They were Christian boys taken from conquered Balkan territories through the Dev Sherm system, a compulsory levy in which children were removed from their families, converted to Islam, and raised under strict imperial supervision. Yet, rather than producing broken captives, this process created some of the most disciplined and loyal warriors of the age. From early childhood, Janissary recruits were separated from their origins and immersed in intense physical and psychological conditioning. They were educated in warfare, discipline, language, and even music. Living in communal barracks, forbidden to marry, and permitted no private loyalties. They existed solely in service to the Sultan. Their training demanded absolute obedience, but also cultivated battlefield competence and tactical initiative. Janissaries fought in tightly organized formations, conducted night assaults, stormed fortified positions, and most significantly mastered firearms long before many European forces. By the 15th century, they were already using early matchlock muskets in coordinated formations. Their integration of gunpowder weapons with strict discipline made them one of the first standing infantry forces to systematically employ firearms in large-scale combat. They maintained their own internal hierarchy, living quarters, and social structure, effectively forming a military institution embedded within the state yet distinct from it. What makes them even more unusual is how completely their identity was institutional. Janissaries were originally forbidden to marry, own land, or pass their status to descendants. They belonged not to family, tribe, or ethnicity, but to the state itself. This model of professional soldiering resembled modern national armies far more than the feudal levies and mercenary bands of their time. For centuries, they stood at the forefront of Ottoman expansion, from the fall of Constantinople to the Battle of Mohacs and the campaigns against Vienna. Yet, despite their influence, they left behind few formal military treatises. Much of what is known comes from imperial records, travel accounts, and foreign observers astonished by their coordination and fire discipline. By the 17th century, however, the system began to erode. Corruption spread. Many janissaries abandoned earlier restrictions, marrying, acquiring property, and even selling positions. Their growing political power became a threat to the state itself. In 1826, Sultan Mahmud II abolished the corps in what became known as the Auspicious Incident, a violent purge designed to erase their institutional dominance. No military before or after institutionalized such total loyalty, ideological conditioning, and centralized firearms training to this degree. Their existence stands as both a triumph of discipline and a warning about the dangers of unchecked military autonomy. If the Janissaries represented an early prototype of the modern professional soldier, why was their model never fully replicated? Or was it quietly in the formation of later forces built on control, indoctrination, and absolute loyalty, hidden beneath different names and different flags?